Guys, how many of you, when asked your favorite sport, will say like baseball or football or tennis or golf? Those are a few that I appreciate. But if you asked me, what's your favorite sport? I would just love to be like, it's actually sex. Sex is my favorite sport. It's the one I'm always rooting for. I root for sex more than I root for almost anything in life. That's part of the reason I started this channel, to increase the amount of sex happening in the world. Today, we're going to kick off a multi-segment series addressing a fundamental question about intersexual dynamics. It's perhaps the fundamental paradox of intersexual dynamics. Women need protection from men. So why is it that they simultaneously find male violence so arousing? This fundamental inconsistency has led to a lot of frustration among men trying to figure out how to solve their reproductive problem. We will start with a basic principle. And quick reminder, we're only talking about when men and women engage in consensual, enthusiastic sex. We're not talking about long-term relationships, situationships, or God forbid marriage. This is about hooking up. When a woman sees a man who represents a direct threat to her power, her liberty, and her autonomy, all of which are derived from her sexuality, she is aroused. I know, it's a little strange. We're going to unpack that a bit. We're talking about the biological level. Everybody knows what the fight or flight response is. You experience a threat and you can respond to it by fighting or fleeing. If somebody's bigger and scarier than you, more than likely fleeing is the right move. Who is not that good at fighting? I don't care if they air MMA on TV for the next 100 years. You will never convince me that women are better at fighting than men are. Women do not necessarily have the same fight or flight response to threats. I'd like to suggest they have another type of response, especially if they have peak, apex level fertility. Let's call it the fuck or flight response. I don't know if anybody else has coined that phrase. I'd like to think it's a Nixon the Dark original, but I'm sure somebody else has thought of it. If you're aware of it, throw it in the comments section. Maybe we'll look it up. Otherwise, we'll pat ourselves on the back for coming up with fuck or flight. How does this work? It's pretty obvious. When a man engages with a woman and he represents some level of threat to her sexuality, she's aroused by it. She's extraordinarily aroused by it. And when you couple this with the male sex drive, which is so insanely powerful, what you get is a woman who has a very, very, very persuasive tool in her toolkit for as long as her fertility remains at high levels. Sex can get a woman out of a number of situations that you or I are not really able to get out of in the same way. The raw, life-giving power of female sexuality is so persuasive that a lot of men will accommodate women just on the vague promise of experiencing sexual access with her. I don't know about you, I kind of like actual sex more than the promise of sex, but you see how the dynamic works. When a woman experiences a threatening man, she can flee, and plenty of them do in plenty of situations, but she can also fuck. Where does this leave you? You are a really smart audience. You are starting to draw some conclusions that, if you acted them out, may land you in some really, really hot water. It is a high-risk environment for men, even if it feels higher risk for women. We have two parting bits of advice. We're going to cover some other nuances of this paradox in the next segments, but we're leaving you with two bits of advice. Notice that we said a man who represents a threat. If you actually make threats to a woman, that is not the same. So you do not simply become arousing by threatening women. You become arousing by embodying threats, which is to say you embody the potential for violence. Evolution or God or whatever it is, that this life force that keeps us populating this earth to the extent we still do, it needs men who are capable of handling very difficult situations. This is why the capacity for violence is fundamental to the male protector algorithm. So when we say get jacked, that implies that you must cultivate the capacity for handling potentially violent situations. Last parting thought. Fuck or flight deals with two scenarios. There is a third scenario that is in your control. If you represent a threat to a woman, again, we're not talking about making threats, we're talking about representing threats. If you represent a threat to a woman and you try to accommodate her anxiety by giving her comfort, she may not flee, but she also may not become aroused. This is why we recommend that you do not lead with comfort if you are trying to build attraction with a woman. Comfort, especially if you give it too soon or at the wrong time, will make you less attractive. It may not make you unattractive, but no matter who you are, if your value is on the bubble, if a woman is not sure what level of attraction she has for you, comfort will decrease her attraction. When you are engaging with a woman, there is absolutely a time and a place for offering comfort, and we recommend you get good at that as well when you learn game. But if you no longer represent a threat, you are sacrificing one major component of what makes her aroused by a man. Thanks for listening. Like, subscribe. Don't do anything stupid out there. Take care.